That is your real life vibranium. Capitalism has not helped the Congo.
45 million people starved to death eating bark and dirt and leaves.
That slavery is part of capitalism.
No, it's not.
There's an anime called Psychopaths.
Capitalism in like the 50s was totally different than capitalism today. There was actually this dream to work for. You were rewarded for working hard. The more hours you put in at your company, the more you got raises, the more your lifestyle increased. You could afford the car, you could afford the house, you could feed your kids very easily. You could also own a cottage upstate. The American dream or capitalism, like I said, from the 50s to like the 80s was totally different.
Our dollar doesn't mean fucking shit.
Our dollar does mean something. It's an indicator for what things are valued.
Happened right as the US dollar came off the gold reserve, meaning the USD was backed by nothing, just paper, bonds, and money printing. This is when we see the explosion of assets, housing, stocks, businesses, everything was increasing in value a ton. Except people's wages, except people's currency, which is going the other way.
The first step under communism is increasing the productive forces. In the US, over 80% of our population is living paycheck to paycheck. If you provide people's basic needs, if you invest in economic growth and in jobs and in infrastructure rather than investing in endless war and massacring Muslim people in Gaza, you're going to make this country a lot stronger. You're going to make the people a lot more stable.
See how a bottle of Coca-Cola was 25 cents in the 30s and now it's $2, whatever. But we see it more so and quicker in assets. When real estate runs up and has a boom cycle, that's a clear indication of not necessarily the assets going up in value a tremendous amount. It's more so the devaluation of the currency, meaning it takes more dollars to buy that same house. Now, the amateur will just see it as, well, the housing has increased in value. That is partly true, but what's also happening is your currency is getting worth less, meaning it takes more dollars to buy that same house.
But I think capitalism does the best job of taking what we're dealing with and trying to make it operate in a system where people are civil to one another and there's natural cooperation within it.
The smartest way to work in capitalism, especially nowadays, is to invest in assets. So while capitalism is all in great and technology has totally changed the game in how we can work less with our physical bodies, we can work smarter, it's super clear. The data is out, especially for real estate, which is one of the best assets to hold in all of human history. And those who hold it longer are going to become more wealthy. Now, the problem we're seeing now is that there's fewer and fewer true capitalists left. And that's because the game is rigged and it's all for us to see. With social media now, with technology being so amazing that we can communicate all across the world in a matter of seconds, we can point out things much easier than our parents, our boomer parents could in the 80s, 70s, and 90s. The information is all there to see. And the reality is capitalism is getting harder in a sense for people who don't understand how the game of life works.
Careful, there's an old saying, we went out of the fire into the frying pan. The question is, under what system do you not get the guys at the top becoming super wealthy? Because Stalin and Mao Zedong, these people become... Chavez, okay, Castro, this man is no angel. The question becomes, which one dampens our greed?
Sure. The average person who decides to quit a menial job, who has no access to education to get them a higher paying job, who has no social connection, no cultural connection, no state apparatus helping them in real life, just pure real life. It's not as easy as turn off, turn on.
People are getting degrees in all sorts of crazy things, going to college for gender studies, but they don't understand how fucking money works. The thing we use on a day-to-day basis to live, people don't understand. Yet they're going to college and school for all these wacky-ass things that mean nothing. And because it's getting so hard and so progressive in the economics, especially when it comes to taxes and taxing the rich and increasing taxes, it's pushing and pushing true capitalists out, and eventually we're going to run out.
But for most people, when we say capitalism, what we mean is the free exchange and selling and buying of goods, right? And the more you have of that, the more freedom you have in those decisions, the less the government's involved in that, the more capitalism you have.
Why I truly believe you're seeing this giant conservative wave that's been building for the past 4, 5, 10 years, really. But it's about to be a tsunami, I truly believe, in the next couple of years, where people are saying, enough is enough. This woke bullshit has got to end. 50% taxes, 60% tax rates, permits and regulations and red tape on starting a business and hiring employees is getting too hard to be a capitalist. The only people you have left really are the true savage ass capitalists. People like me. I mean, I hang out with my buddies and my friends who are all real estate investors and capitalists at heart. We're loving it. Honestly, I'll just be totally candid. We're absolutely loving it because there's so much less competition and things are getting easier and easier with technology. So if you're willing to put in the work and learn and build your knowledge on how things work, how business works, how taxes work, how can you write things off, all the shit that everybody should know and should have been taught in school, if you know those things, it's getting easier and easier to be wealthy, to be crushing, to be making several hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at minimum.
45 million people starve to death eating bark and dirt and leaves. And it's hard to know, is it doing better, all the things you like? Are you sure that's from the communist side, the Mao Zedong side?
I would argue
or is that
that's
from the capitalist side?
I mean, where I'm from, Canada, it's clear. Investors and capitalists are leaving Canada in droves. Now, it's not some small amount that is insignificant. It's very significant. Speaking for myself, I sold all of my 150 properties in Canada, and I'm no longer buying more real estate. I'm no longer providing rental housing in Canada. And this is happening from coast to coast across the country. I will say, as a real estate investor in Canada, I'm pretty up there in terms of knowing all the big boys across the country with my social media. And so many investors, one after the other, are no longer building in Canada. They're no longer buying rental properties in Canada. They're no longer flipping in Canada. They're coming down to the United States, where capitalism for now is still alive and well in certain states like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, etc. People are fleeing these two progressive, these two left areas because taxes are too high, regulations are too high, it's too hard to start a business, to hire employees, it's madness. You got to pay these people a certain minimum amount or else you can't have employees, which puts stress on the business to grow it. The very policies that are put in to help the lower guy, the middle class, the lower middle class, the very policies that are put in are actually hurting those people.
This amount of welfare, if you make under $24,000 a year, you make $25,000 a year, your benefits drop off. So it actually disincentivizes people from moving up, working harder, taking on more jobs. And it's a terrible structure.
Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a minimum wage or any of those kind of things. But the reality is putting in so many regulations and red tape is actually hurting the very people these politicians are trying to help, because the business owners like myself are saying, fuck it. The game is way too hard. It's way too stacked over here for the tenant or for the employee. Forget it. It's too much liability, too much risk. I'm going somewhere else where there's less tape. I'm going to provide jobs and provide housing down there. We have less businesses starting companies. We have less people hiring employees right now. It's a mess.
That is freedom, autonomy, the government not getting in your way.
Yes. Now, here's the absolute truth. The most woke companies are actually the most capitalist companies. Not woke in the sense of gender studies and all this bullshit. Woke in the sense of they're fucking awake. They know the game in front of them. They know what's going on. They understand the rules of monetary policy, of fiscal policy, of socioeconomics. They understand what's actually the fuck going on. And they're using it to their advantage. Take a guy like Andrew Tate, for example. You either love this guy or you hate this guy. But what he's saying when it comes to economics or the system is mostly true. Now, you might not agree with the other shit he says about how to treat women or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what he's saying about business, about economics, about how the world is actually run. The man is spot on. Painted with a brush that everything they say is absolutely crazy. Take a guy like Jordan Peterson, for example. It's the exact same thing. Like 98% of the shit this guy says is totally common sense, totally true, great advice. And yeah, the 2% of the time, he says some wacky ass shit on purpose, by the way, to build his branding, to get eyeballs onto him so that people can listen to whatever else he's got to say. But these guys are basically like amazing actors. They understand publicity, they understand marketing, so they say these wacky ass, outlandish, crazy things to get people talking about them, get eyeballs on them. And the reality is 98% of the shit they say is common sense, totally fundamental, perfect, makes perfect sense. But everything these guys are saying about how the world is actually running is spot on. It's too progressive, it's too woke, it's actually hurting everybody from rising into the middle class, into the upper middle class. The American dream is totally dying if you don't understand capitalism and how to work it, not let it work you. So I got a question for you. Should we let capitalism continue and thrive, or should we just end it? Should we have more communism, more socialism? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Show me some evidence. Whatever side you're arguing for, let me know in the comments. I am curious to hear, and maybe I'll make a video on one of those comments next.